Welcome into the Inside Carolina podcast, the day after. I'm your host, Tommy Ashley. Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com are our sponsors. With the day after comes an attempt to describe what we all saw on Saturday in Kidd Brewer Stadium in Boone, North Carolina. Buck, a lot of North Carolina games have come in front of these eyes over the years, as have it over yours, and I don't know if we've ever seen one similar to this one. Carolina wins it 63-61.
I certainly haven't seen a game like this before in all my viewing years of North Carolina football. It was just really strange game. 71 plays by North Carolina, 81 by App State, and every single one of them seemed to have some impact on the game. Difficult to describe game. I tried on my column this morning, but we'll see how good a job we did. It's just a very, Appalachian State was like T1000 out there. Maybe Jason can give us a hasta la vista, baby, during the podcast. But it was just such, every time North Carolina thought they had App State pinned to the mat, they get up and here we go again. So the way I look at it, it's a road win. North Carolina hasn't had one in last 7 road game attempts. And as well, over a decent team, Appalachian State, we'll see how their season progresses after this. But last 3 years, they've had a top 30 defense and a top 30 offense. So we'll see if that holds up. In the meantime, we can all get out our crying towels about the defense and wonder when and if it's ever going to get fixed. But take the win, move on. Georgia State's up next.
Jason, I want to talk about that defense at length on this podcast, and we can do that a little bit. But I'm going to start with Drake May, to be honest. Shout out to Brett Hickman. Whoever would have thought that Carolina would have gotten better at quarterback and worse on defense going into this season? That is exactly what appears to have happened.
Some of us are not surprised that they got better at quarterback. I mean, that was one of the things that I was pretty persuaded coming into the year that Drake May was special and that they'd be better at quarterback.
Did you really expect him to be this good, though?
Maybe not this good, but close. I thought. I mean, if you go back and you read my preseason scouting report, there's not a whole lot negative in there, and I thought he'd look real good. Maybe not quite this good. I mean, he's a little ahead of schedule, but I'll just say I expected him to look about this good in his career and maybe this year, just maybe not necessarily first 2 games out of the gate. But actually the transition, I said this on Twitter, the transition between Sam Howell and Drake May is reminding me of the transition at Florida State between E.J. Manuel and Jameis Winston, where, you went from a quarterback who's an NFL quarterback, a really good quarterback, and a quality college quarterback who took the program and did a lot of good things. And then you replace him with a guy who you look at and you're like, oh yeah, so that's what like truly elite looks like. And, Drake's special. I mean, now we're going to have to see it against better defenses than this, but he's given me no reason to think that he can't do that.
Side note here that watching some stuff on Twitter this morning, Drake May has 9 touchdown passes in his first 2 games. That's the most touchdown passes in the first 2 games by a freshman or redshirt freshman since at least 2000 and maybe earlier than that. I suspect earlier than that, but somebody on Twitter went back and did the research. 3 other guys are tied at 8. That would be Phillip Rivers, Sam Bradford, and Spencer Rattler that had, as freshmen, 8 touchdown passes in their first game. Mace had 9. So,
yeah, that's again, the guy, he's given me no reason to think that he's going to slow down all that much when he plays against better defenses. Now there are going to be some struggles. He's going to throw some picks here and there. There's still going to be some inconsistency. I mean, he's still young. and they're not perfect around him. I mean, he's difference with some of those guys. You know, Spencer Rattler was playing on a team that around him had way more talent offensively and experience offensively than what Drake has, and so you know that we'll see how that all goes as they step up in competition and personnel that they're facing. But you know, he did what he did yesterday without his best receiver and without one of the 4 or 5 best receivers in the country. So, I mean, guy's pretty good. Now, I don't think. I mean, I was probably one of the most bearish people on whether the coaching staff changes would actually really materially change a whole lot on defense. But I'm surprised by what I'm seeing on defense. I mean, I don't think even the most pessimistic people evaluating UNC coming into this year foresaw them giving up 40 points in a quarter. 338 yards and 40 points in a single quarter to a group of 5 team. I mean, if there's somebody out there who thought who expected to see that coming this year with that defense, I'd like to shake their hand because I didn't see that.
2 touchdowns in 31 seconds.
Yeah, and the thing is, those weren't fluke touchdowns.
There's no special teams touchdowns. There's no defensive touchdowns in there. There's no onside kick, recover, and score touchdown on there. It's straight up offensive touchdown.
Well, they had a fumble recovery touchdown where, they gave them a short field there.
Yeah, in the fourth quarter. Yeah, in the fourth quarter. But those last two, those were just knife through butter, no fluke at all. Those were, nothing funky. Those were just, I mean, wow. Now it does go to show. I mean, I remember getting some flack a couple years ago for talking about when you're in the situation where you can kneel and kneel the game out, do not score that touchdown. That's selfish. And I remember some folks like, oh, just, he's got to score the touchdown. What's the difference in percentages, like 0.5% or whatever. Well, Nesbitt ran that onside kick in, and that's what gave App State another chance. That's selfish to score in that situation, and it's even more selfish to celebrate down the sideline in terms of getting that flag and giving them a shorter field. If they catch that, and this is what you try to coach them to do it. And I know the coaching staff was yelling, get down, get down, get down, but it's hard to do as a player. But that's something that within your program, you have to cultivate of, here's our situation. I know you want to score. I know you've got the end zone there. Take off running all you want, get 20 yards or whatever, and then go down, and then we kneel this game out, and it's 63-56 or 63 55, and no problems. So that's something else. But again, getting back to the defense, I'm just I'm as blown away as anybody in terms of the amount of talent that Carolina has, and we're talking about now sophomores and some juniors that are blue chip talent, that are excellent recruits that got just embarrassed. And at a certain point, look, right now, the problem is not talent. It's not a lack of talent. Yeah, there's a little bit of limited experience in certain cases, but the problem is not lack of experience either. So if it's not talent and it's not experience.
But what do you think about that? And I tend to agree here. I mean, seeing this game up close, and I freely admit I hadn't watched it on video yet, but it was too easy for App State. Granted, Carolina did the same thing to them, but and they're a pretty good defense. But it just seems to me that there is still this major disconnect in what Jason just mentioned, the talent and the experience versus the production. And I think it lays at the coach's hands. I said last year, the adults in the room. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Well, I mean, what's going to happen? You got Georgia State, who's not bad. South Carolina finished them off. And then you've got Notre Dame coming to town in 3 weeks. I mean, Is this going to be the norm going forward, Buck? Or do you see some sort of shift here or growth or whatever you want to call it coming?
Okay, so I'm going to go in this direction with it in terms of, can it get fixed? And are there any signs that we have that it could possibly get fixed? And one of the things that, you really reaching to find something, positive things to say is there was like a 30-minute period in this game in which App State didn't score at all. They scored in like the first few minutes or first seconds of the second quarter, didn't score at all in the third quarter. And so for about 30 minutes or so, North Carolina kept them scoreless. And as I was watching that, in my notes I'm taking during the game, I wrote down, North Carolina's not giving up any chunk plays during this point of the game. And Jason yesterday on the Inside Carolina live radio show that happens pregame, tune in and listen to that. It's very good. That's happens every game day. Jason said that, who wins this game is going to depend on who gets the most big plays, who gets the most explosive plays. And he said, well, that's a little bit, maybe, every game is that way. But in this particular game, during that period of time when North Carolina was holding App State to nothing, they were forcing punts, field goals. They got an interception. The defense did not allow any chunk plays. And then headed into the fourth quarter, they seemed to forget how to stop a big play. And in some ways, this makes it worse because App State scored 61 points in really half a game, essentially. They got 40 of them in the fourth quarter. But if you want to look for positives, some gleam of light, North Carolina has the ability and the talent to hold Appalachian State scoreless for a lengthy period of time. So the coaches have got to figure out what went wrong during the other 30 minutes of that game. And the other part of it is you can see North Carolina players demonstrating that they have the ability to be good. Early in the game, I don't know how many people paid attention to it, but Des Evans looked as good as I've ever seen him in like the first couple of series of the game. There are other players that look very good. Ced Gray was a monster out there. DeAndre Boykins may be the best open field tackler on the UNC team. There's a lot of players that show
low
flashes.
bar. That's a low bar, though. Buck.
Yeah,
bar.
I'm with you, but still, he's good open field tackler. And there's other players that made plays and can make plays. Appalachian State's going to force you to make a play, or otherwise they're going to score. But so I think there's the ability to play well, talent-wise, on the North Carolina defense. And for a huge stretch of the game, it worked. Now, what happened for the floodgates to open? They're going to have to, either cut up that tape or burn it up, one of the two, to figure that out. But if you're looking for any sorts of gleams of, possible positives that they can build on, that they can get better. And, I think Mac Brown said it well in his postgame in a press conference that if you've got an offense that's already, and offenses usually are behind defenses this time of year, if you have an offense playing as efficiently as North Carolina's offense, if you can keep your defense, if you get your defense improving over the course of the year, you have a chance to be really good. So we'll just see how that plays out over time. But we've got to see some results on the field before we can actually, be optimistic about that.
Jason, to Buck's point there, I mean, That's what I'm interested in is how did the switch flip on and off? I mean, App comes out firing on all cylinders, and then to Buck's point, I think they scored what was it, less than a minute into the second quarter, and then nothing, virtually nothing until 12 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and then they scored 6 touchdowns in 12 minutes, like we've already talked about. I mean, where's the divergence of production coming from in those time spans? It's not just game to game; it's now game within games and quarter to quarter. That's what I think is the hardest part for at least me to understand.
So I'm a little less optimistic about that little blip because I'm looking at the drive chart right now. And what I see is 14 drives from App State, and there's that little chunk in the middle where there are 4 drives where they didn't score. So that's that lengthy period. I mean, it was a lengthy period partly because it was separated by halftime. But here's their results in those 14 drives. Touchdown, 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 field goal attempt, punt, turnover on downs, interception, touchdown, 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 touchdown. So, I mean, when you look at that, you go, okay, so what made the difference? Well, one, you had 7-play, 41-yard drive that ended in a field goal missed. I mean, yeah, they didn't score a touchdown, so good job, guys. But I mean, still move the football for 7 minutes and 13 seconds and seven plays, 41 yards. And, it's not like the defense really bowed up there. Then you had the last drive of theirs before the half, which was a minute 44, 4-play punt. Now that was a drive where they got some pressure on the quarterback, and I think they got their hand on a ball there. But good job. All right. Then they had a 5 minute 29 second drive of 12 plays for 38 yards, which you'd say 12 plays 38 yards. Well, they had the 15-yard penalty, if you remember. So they moved it 38 yards, but they actually moved it 53 yards on 12 plays, and then turned it over on downs because they actually did get stopped. But if you remember there, they had a couple drops on that series that would have been first downs. A slight overthrow and a drop. So, I mean, those guys were open. They had chances, and they just, App missed some opportunities in this game. None more than the first 2-point conversion, which should have won the game for him. I mean, the guy was wide open, and if he keeps running like he's supposed to towards where that ball's thrown, we're talking about a loss right now, most likely. So, should UNC be, get the credit defensively for getting the stop on that first 2-point conversion? They didn't get. I mean, that's the equivalent of a corner. One of those corners that is beat by 3 steps. Quarterback overthrows the ball or whatever, and then starts celebrating, acting like he did something in coverage. And it's like, dude, you were beat. So but anyway, you have that on downs, and then you have the one big stop right after that, and this is where essentially they got 3 stops in a row, not including the field goal attempt. I'm not really counting as a full stop. That's a half stop. But then they had the Cedric Gray interception where he did a great job on the RPO, kind of stayed in the rush lane, and then got right in front of that glance route, and it was a good catch, good athletic play. But that was just one guy making a really athletic play, and that basically boiled down to what happened. So it's not like there was a switch that got flipped where, oh yeah, the defense really just showed out that they could stop them, all of a sudden, and then the gates opened. It was a little bit more fool's gold than that. It was, you had one player make a really good play. You had a combination of a couple of offensive shooting themselves in the foot situations where, Gene Chizik likes to say, if you make a team, have to drive the field in 12 plays, normally college offenses are going to make some mistakes. Well, they had a 12-play, 38-yard drive, and they had a 15-yard penalty. They had, I think, a 10-yard penalty in there somewhere. They had a couple drop, that was a situation where the offense made those mistakes. And, that kind of proves what Chizik is talking about on that. Problem is on all the other drives, you're looking at, after all of that, 8 plays, 71-yard touchdown, 3 plays, 7 plays, 3 plays, 8 plays, 2 plays. They're not even making them go 10 plays. So
right, but see, I think I'm not trying to sugarcoat anything or try to talk be a Pollyanna about it.
You're not going to be positive about this one.
No, but the thing that I'd look at, not disputing anything you say, is that in virtually every one of their drives, and you were rolling off some of the numbers as far as the number of plays in a drive, and if you look at that when they scored their first 21 points, App State was reeling off chunk plays. They were reeling off chunk plays during that time when they were scoring so rapidly and so proficiently. During the time when they weren't scoring, North Carolina was able to prevent those chunk plays. So, I give them that much credit, and learn to build on that. See what look at the tape. Let's figure out what it is that went wrong. All of a sudden, we were giving up a lot of chunk plays. Then we weren't giving up a bunch of chunk plays. Then we started giving up chunk plays. And I don't think Appalachian State changed anything. They did. It's up to the staff to figure out how were we successful during that stretch of the game.
The biggest thing is they got a little more pressure, I think, in that stage of the game. I thought they got the couple of the mistakes that App made. They were, Bryce was under pressure. They didn't get a whole lot of pressure in this game otherwise.
Absolutely. So if we're looking at the defense, and Jason, I'll start with you and then bounce back to Buck. Are there any positives? I mean, Cedric Gray had a good game, good interception. And Buck, I referenced it to you off the air. That last 2-point conversion stop reminded me of State in 98 or 99 in Charlotte, where Earl Hood and David Bomar stopped the State guy just short of the end zone, where you got Noah Taylor making the initial one and Kamen Rucker coming up and finishing it off. Otherwise, who knows? They might still be playing, or at least they'd have played for another hour. But are there any positives that anybody, fan base, coaching staff, players themselves can take from that performance on that side of the ball yesterday, Jason? Any?
There are a few, but they're not big ones. I thought Cedric Gray was a positive on the whole. He made some mistakes, but that interception that he had and a few of the recoveries that he had, that guy's an athlete and is a good eraser there to be able to, they would have had a number of plays that would have been much bigger plays if Cedric Gray didn't have the wheels he does. So that's one. And I did think Des Evans, this was one of the better games that Des has played in terms of being able to flash and make some plays here and there. Beyond that, everything else was kind of as we've seen it, and the majority of it was not positive. So I'm going to go back, and when I start prepping these videos that I'll be doing for analysis this week, I'm gonna take a look at a lot more closely. So maybe a few more positives stick out, but on my first watch, there were not a bunch of positives on the defensive side of the ball, as you would expect in a game where you give up, 338 yards and 40 points in a quarter.
Got anything, Buck? Any positives for you? You mentioned the chunk play deal.
I think we've gotten to the point where we've plucked all the feathers off this turkey on the defense, and we can move on a little bit. And one of the things I'd like to move on to, because I think we kind of rushed past Drake May a bit, that what made me think about Drake again is Jason talking about film review study. I'll be very interested to see what plays Jason picks out for some of the throws that May made yesterday, because some of them are throws that NFL quarterbacks cannot make. A bunch of them just cannot make that throw. that the one to Gavin Blackwell over the middle, 36 yards, and that ball did not move a foot up and down on the way to get there. You know, it was like on a flat line all the way to Blackwell, and the throw in the end zone to where he was probably maybe 15 yards from the end zone. I'm trying to think of who caught that ball, but he just flicked it basically and threw a touchdown pass. Trying to remember who caught that one, but
talking about the one over the middle in the end zone.
Oh,
there were a lot of ones in the end zone.
Over the middle in the end zone.
I think that was Paysor.
You know, the one to Nesbitt in the end zone. There were just a number of throws that he made that, you know, that's what you see on Sundays. You know, that's what you see, you know,
with the good quarterbacks on Sundays.
Right. And so I'd be very interested to see how Jason diagrams some of those plays. And he has just been, you know, I talked a little bit about you know, he's thrown 9 TD passes. But think about some of the stats. Now I know it's Florida A&M and Appalachian State. Appalachian State's a good Group of 5 defense. They're not a great Power 5 defense. They're not Georgia, for example. Let's put it that way.
Oh my gosh, Georgia.
But he was, you know, so far he is 10 of 18 throwing the ball on third down, and he's converted. Let me see, 10 of those throws for first down. I mean, he's completed 10 passes. Completed 12 passes on 18 third down throws. 10 of them are gone for the first down. He's run the ball 16 times, and almost half of those times, 7, that's to pick up a first down. So he is a chain moving son of a gun. You know? He knows how to move the chains, and if he could keep that up, that bodes well. And that parlays a little bit back into the defense. The way the offense is performing, it's giving the defense time to figure out some stuff, and that's a positive in my opinion. And random stats: on 3rd and 4 to 6 yards, he's completed 5 of 6 of those throws. All 5 of his completions went for a first down. It's just insane how good he is at converting first down. And a lot of that, I'd love to see PFF stats about this. You know, one of the things that people will talk about the PFF talks about quite a bit when they do their stats is how good is a quarterback under pressure. And I think Drake May is outstanding under pressure. DJ Jones' touchdown, for example, they had like 7 or 8 guys coming in on a blitz to tackle May, and he just tossed it out to Jones for what ended up being a 46-yard touchdown, something of that nature, and did that under an incredible amount of pressure. So, you know, I think in that regard, his height helps him a lot because he can look over or see over what's coming at him to an extent. And so that opens up his vision downfield a little bit over the middle and in other places. But North Carolina doesn't win this game last year, I don't believe. Not without Josh Downs. Does anybody believe that? That they would have won this game at Appalachian without Josh Downs last year?
They don't win this game the last couple of years.
Well, the question is, are we saying does last year's offense win with this year's defensive performance? Because I don't think last year's defense would have given up 61 points against this App team.
It's essentially the same defense.
Right, but I don't think last year's would have given up 61 points.
Yeah. Well, we're raising the should we have fired Bateman ugly head here, are we, on this podcast?
I said nothing of the sort. I'm just saying I don't think last year's defense would have given up 61 points or 40 points in a quarter.
It is let's I mean, bottom line, Drake May is pretty good. He can play football pretty well, but something else that I thought was very interesting in this one, and remember, we're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Take care of them. They
Woo!
take care of us. Get your 10% off. A lot of Carolina fans in app yesterday sporting some Johnny T-Shirt gear, so look after them and get your 10% and all that good stuff. But Jason, I don't think Carolina missed Josh Downs a bit yesterday. Maybe you say otherwise, but Pacehour looked really good. Nesbitt, Blackwell had some catches. I mean, J.J. Jones looked good. This is truly a plug-and-play offense, but Drake May is clearly extremely good. But we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Pacehour stepping in and just – those are Josh Downs numbers. I mean, all you do is switch that name on the stat sheet, and that's Josh Downs. 8 for 92, touchdown, caught all 8 of his targets. Speak to that guy.
I mean, really, all 3 of the young wide receivers, Pacehour, Jones, Blackwell. I mean, Jones set the tone early in the game with a couple big catches. Yeah, it didn't look like they missed Josh Downs. Now, here's the thing: App State they forced a punt on the second drive, and then the fumble wouldn't have mattered. And then there was a punt in the fourth quarter. So, maybe with Josh Downs, it wouldn't have been a punt.
They scored 80?
Yeah, maybe they'd have scored 80. I don't know. But I think you still miss Josh Downs' ability to convert shorter stuff into longer chunk plays, a little bit higher percentage. I mean, he is a little quicker and more explosive than Pacehour. But when you look at like you said, when you look at the numbers, those look like Josh Downs numbers. And when you look at what they were able to do downfield, yeah, I mean that they were able to. When you score, you've got 13 total drives, including the kneel down. So in 12 drives, you score on 9 of them. It doesn't seem like you're missing an All-American there. So yeah, give those young guys credit. I think you also have to give the offensive coaching staff credit for that. Give Longo and Galloway some credit for developing these young guys. I mean, Jones, Pacehour, Blackwell, these were good prospects coming out of high school, but let's be fair, they weren't 5-star Andre Green coming out of high school, and they've developed quickly. I mean, these are guys that are in their second year in the program. These are guys that receivers normally take some time, and they were consistently on the same page with the quarterback. This is an offense that wants your guys to run to grass in certain cases. You're going to have to make little adjustments on the routes. You have to be, pretty precise in certain respects on what you're asked to do, just like any college offense. And those guys did it. So, give the coaching staff some credit for having those guys ready to play in the absence of, your All-American being on the sideline. So yeah, that's a major positive. And of course, Nesbitt and Morales had 3 catches apiece as well. Hood and DJ Jones each had a catch. George Pettaway had 2 catches. So, I mean, at a certain point, it also helps when your quarterback just spreads the ball such that, you're not force feeding one guy the ball 12, 14 times. You're just, oh, that guy's open. Well, I'll get it to him.
He is definitely seeing the entire field in every play. You mentioned Caleb Hood. He looked good on the long run. Pettaway, Hampton fumbled and had some issues, but the hot hand approach on the running game. But Buck, let's sort of wrap this one up. Carolina, I think the title of this is going to be "They Won," and ultimately that's really all that matters. And Mac Brown said that repeatedly in the post-game press conference. I'd be interested to what Jason said and what I wanted to mention before. The development of guys on offense has been impressive. The way the coaching staff has developed guys, talented guys, but developed them into being not just talented guys, but big-time producers. Other side of the ball, maybe that discussion can be had. But, Buck, wrap us up here. Give us the overarching thought and what you see down the road starting next week at noon in Atlanta, Turner Field, or whatever they call it now that Georgia State's taken over.
Well, before I get there, I did want to single out Caleb Hood a bit for yesterday's game, because I think it was App State had gone up 21-7, and North Carolina was struggling at that point offensively to some extent. And that's when Hood had a catch and run, 22-yard conversion, and that, I think, flipped the switch for the offense a bit. I think that kick-started them. And an App State defender had him dead to rights, near the goal, near the line of scrimmage, and he broke it for 22 yards. And I think that converted the first down and got North Carolina moving on that drive, and ultimately resulted in a touchdown. But as far as Georgia State goes, now Georgia State brings back a very experienced squad. I mean, they're a team that's got a lot of fourth and fifth year players on it. They're capable of playing Power 5 teams well. I'm pretty sure I think they lost to Auburn by 10 points last year, and maybe had the lead going into the fourth quarter, if I'm remembering right.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is not a team that's just going to roll over for North Carolina. They're going to have to be on their game. They're just coming off a very emotional, hard-fought win on the road in Boone, and they need to get that win out of their head quickly and focus on Georgia State, because Georgia State's going to come to play football, and the game at Auburn was at Auburn, so they're not going to be intimidated by anybody. Now, North Carolina did beat them last year, 59-17, but I don't know that you can transfer that result to this year at Georgia State, particularly since we don't know if the defense is going to improve at all over this past week. So that's a concern. You have to worry about that. How well is the defense going to respond to what happened to them up in Boone? Other than that, we got Drake May, so I'm feeling pretty good about the game.
Be in every game as long as that guy's taking snaps. Now, here's the thing. Here's one other thing. The ACC in general, not just UNC, but UNC and the rest of the ACC in general need to stop scheduling these road games against group of 5 teams like this. I mean, you look at State, should have lost yesterday. UNC should have lost yesterday.
Virginia Tech
did lose. Now, Virginia Tech, I'm not counting because they don't have a quarterback on their roster that's a Power 5 level quarterback. So I mean, and they're gonna they're at the bottom. They're gonna be at the bottom of the ACC this year. I mean, that's a bad football team. But
Greg Barnes was just a year late on that prediction.
Yeah.
And let me throw this in, Jason, too, because I want to say this because I like to admit very big errors that I've made. And on our Over and Under podcast, I picked the under. I was pretty much consistently under on Bryson Nesbitt, 6.5 touchdowns. He's already got 2. So,
yeah, I think we're all pretty comfortable.
I think he's going to exceed that 6.5 mark.
Well, I think part of that is that we're all of us who took the over on the 30 touchdowns for Drake May are feeling pretty comfortable about that over too. So
yeah.
But
third of the way there after 2 games.
But here's the interesting thing to think about in this, and this gets to UNC should not be playing on the road in Boone and then at Georgia State, let alone in the same season. With Virginia Tech losing to Old Dominion, the ACC has now lost, and this is per David Hale, has now lost 20 road games against non-Power 5 teams in the playoff era. 20 road games as a conference.
That many.
They've lost that many in the Power 5 era. The SEC has played 22 road games versus non-Power 5 in that stretch. So, and Hale makes the right observation here. The return on investment for those games is not what a lot of ACC athletic directors think it is. because what they're doing is they don't want to pay the big money payout to get that team to visit you without you visiting their place. And so, you're penny wise, pound foolish, and you say, okay, fine, we'll visit you, and we'll do like a 2-for-1 or something. And so they get their home game out of it, and you don't have to pay the extra, $450,000, $500,000 to get them to come to your place without a return trip. SEC programs are like, yeah, we'd rather not go to that snake pit and have a chance of really getting beat. We're going to have you come here where you're really much less likely to lose or to give us a loss. And we'll pay you the $400,000 or $500,000 necessary to make this a much less likely loss. This is something that the UNC brass and the rest of the ACC needs to take a page from that and say, look, first of all, some of these teams, it's maybe don't even schedule. And if you are going to put them on the schedule, when you're playing Georgia State, it needs to be in Chapel Hill every time. When you're playing App State, it needs to be in Chapel Hill every time. Because App State beat North Carolina in Chapel Hill the last time, but it's less likely. And if you're going to do it in Chapel Hill. You can't afford to have these road games because those are good teams, and those turn into really hard games on the road because those are those programs' Super Bowls. And Tommy, there's pretty good atmosphere there yesterday. Yeah,
it was really nice. It was very fun in Boone.
Yeah.
I will say one thing. App State fans need to come up with some better taunts, pregame taunts. They were
You're not good. You're not good.
Something like that.
Yeah. So, but at any rate, that's something that I think is an important conclusion about this in terms of program building. If you're the UNC brass, that's something you have to think about and say, you know what? Don't be penny wise, pound foolish. You got a schedule to help your team. You got a schedule to build your program and to build in more likely wins.
Yep. I would wager, you mentioned the SEC's paid 22. I'd wager that all of those come from the bottom ones, Vanderbilt's, Kentucky's, South Carolina, people like that, and not the big dogs in there.
Alabama ain't visiting Troy.
Never. And money talks, and we've had that discussion a long time. Anyway, they won. Carolina won 63-61 over App State, and it was insane in that place. I mean, give that crowd a credit. It was pretty raucous, I would say.
How about a Hasta La Vista baby from Staples and Arnold?
You're not coming back.
Hasta la vista, baby.
I
gotta get it right. Hold on. Hasta la vista, baby.
We are sliding into the abyss. It's like sliding off one of those mountains up there. Jason and Buck, it's been fun. It's been the Day After podcast. This game will be broken down forever in the annals. 40 points in a quarter and still won. I'd like to see who's done that before. Guys, it's always a pleasure. Johnny T-Shirts, always our sponsor. Take care of them. They take care of us. We'll see you next time.
We'll be back.